Chitraketu Vacha. King Chitraketu said, Ajita, O my unconquerable Lord, Jita, conquered, Samamati be, by persons who have conquered the mind. Sadhubihi, the devotees. Bhavan, your lordship. Jita Atmabihi, who have completely controlled the senses. Bhavata, by you. Vijita, and Bhajatam, to those who always engage in your service. Akama Atmanam, with no motives for material profit. Ya, who Atmada, giving yourself. Ati Karunaha, extremely merciful. Translation. Chitraketu said, O unconquerable Lord, although you cannot be conquered by anyone, you are certainly conquered by devotees who have control of the mind and senses. They can keep you, they can keep you under their control because you are causelessly merciful to devotees who desire no material profit from you. Indeed, you give yourself to them, and because of this, you also have full control over your devotees. Please repeat. Chitraketu said, O unconquerable Lord, although you cannot be conquered by anyone, you are certainly conquered by devotees who have control of the mind and senses. They can keep you under their control because you are causelessly merciful to devotees who desire no material profit from you. Indeed, you give them to indeed, you give yourself to them. And because of this, you have full control over your devotees. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The Lord and the devotees both conquer. The Lord is conquered by the devotees, and the devotees are conquered by the Lord. Because of being conquered by one another, they both derive transcendental bliss from their relationship. The highest perfection of this mutual conquering is exhibited by Krishna and the gopis. The gopis conquered Krishna, and Krishna conquered the gopis. Thus, whenever Krishna played his flute, he conquered the minds of the gopis. And without seeing the gopis, Krishna could not be happy. Other transcendentalists, such as Gyanis and Yogis, cannot conquer the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Only pure devotees can conquer him. Pure devotees are described as samamati, which means that they never deviate from devotional service under any circumstances. It is not that devotees worship the Supreme Lord only when happy. They worship him even when in distress. Happiness and distress do not hamper the process of devotional service. Therefore, Srimad Bhagavatam says The devotional service is the haituki apartiyata, unmotivated and uninterrupted. When a devotee offers devotional service to the Lord without any motive, anyabilasita sunyam, his service cannot be hampered by any material condition, apartiyata. Thus, a devotee who offers service in all conditions of life can conquer the Supreme Personality of Godhead. A special distinction between devotees and other transcendentalists, namely the Gyanis and Yogis, is that Gyanis and Yogis artificially try to become one with the Supreme, whereas devotees never aspire for such an impossible accomplishment. Devotees know that their position is to be eternally servants of the Supreme Lord and never to be one with him. Therefore, they are called samamati or jitatma. They detest oneness with the Supreme. They have no lusty desires for oneness. Instead, their desire is to be freed from all material hankering. Therefore, they are called nishkama, desireless. A living entity cannot exist without desires, but desires that can never be fulfilled are called kama, lusty desires. Kamastaster hritajnana. Because of lusty desires, non-devotees are deprived of their intelligence. Thus, they are unable to conquer the Supreme Lord. Whereas devotees, being freed from such unreasonable desires, can conquer the Lord. Such devotees are also conquered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because they are pure, being free from all material desires, they fully surrender to the Supreme Lord, and therefore the Lord conquers them. Such devotees never aspire for liberation. They simply desire to serve the lotus feet of the Lord. Because they serve the Lord without desires for remuneration, they can conquer the mercy of the Lord. The Lord is by nature very merciful, and when he sees that his servant is working without desires for material profit, naturally he is conquered. Devotees are always engaged in service. Savaya Manaha Krishna Padara Vindayor Chamsi Vaikunta Gunar Nivarnane. All the activities of their senses are engaged in the service of the Lord. Because of such devotion, the Lord gives himself to his devotees as if they could use him for any purpose they might desire. Of course, devotees have no purpose other than to serve. When a devotee fully surrenders and has no aspiration for material profit, the Lord certainly gives him all opportunities for service. This is the position of the Lord when conquered by his devotees. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vishnu Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Vachani Nivishesha Sanivadi Vasujati Starni. So this is the first prayer by Chitraketu in the story of the life of Chitraketu. And what strikes me in this purport is that it just seems to me Prabhupada is revealing that he is a pure devotee. Like, how can someone other than a pure devotee understand the relationship of a pure devotee with Krishna? So since I'm going to ask your permission to talk about Srila Prabhupada today. And is that okay with everyone? Okay. Because I don't consider myself a philosopher. I have given a real Bhagavatam class in the past, but I see myself as a Jagai Madai who was saved in that, there's so many Jagai and Madais, but I am one of them who was saved by Srila Prabhupada, as we all are, but I'm just saying that I see Prabhupada just, pulled me out of the gutter. What can I say? Because my story of how I joined the movement, the short story is a friend took me to the Hare Krishna temple in Boston and left me there. That's how I joined. I didn't know anything. I didn't even know what the Maha Mantra was. I didn't know that Krishna was God. I knew nothing. But I did see devotees chanting in Berkeley, California. It was 1968, sometime that year. And I fully expected them that someone was going to set themselves on fire as a protest to the Vietnam War, because that was going on. And the saffron cloth, I thought that made them, the devotees were Buddhists. It was maybe 4 brahmacharis. And then I saw a woman dressed in a sari pushing a stroller, a pram, with a baby in it, child. And I was kind of surprised, that there was a woman there. Anyway, after that, I did see devotees in Hawaii, and they were chanting Hare Krishna. And to this day, I cannot explain why I was attracted to the chanting. I mean, of course, it's all attractive, but still, it made me feel good to chant. I didn't let the devotees know I was chanting. I would stay at the back because devotees chanting anywhere on the streets in America would draw a crowd. And I just didn't want them to know that I was liking the chanting. I didn't want them to talk to me. I just hid in the back. But again, make a long story short, I was in Boston, and I was staying with a couple who had young children. They were old friends, and I guess I was a little too weird for them. They didn't want me to stay there, and because I was chanting Hare Krishna, they called up the Hare Krishna temple and say, "We have one of yours. She's chanting Hare Krishna. Can I bring her to you?" He had read in a magazine that the Hare Krishna temple was a drug rehabilitation center. And they said, "Well, no, we're not really drug rehabilitation. You can't bring her here." And then when my friend told his wife, she goes, "No way. They have to take her. She can't stay here." So we called the temple again and convinced somebody that I could be brought over. And I arrived at about 11 o'clock after the Sunday feast in the Boston temple. And according to Ananga Manjari, Devi Dasi, who's probably most famous for her son being Vishvambar Seth, famous Kirtaniya, she was 17 at the time. She was kind of became my bhaktin leader, you could say. She said she stuffed burfis in my mouth every time I woke up because all I did was sleep, she said, for a week. I don't know. I don't remember that. All I remember is I went out of Harinam. Every other devotee was wearing a cloth cut from a bolt of cloth. It was just like either you're wearing saffron or yellow. The grihastas were wearing yellow. Everybody else was wearing saffron. No borders. I mean, they looked ridiculous. That's why they always said we looked like we were wearing bed sheets, because it was just a bolt of cloth. But they put me in a real sari, so I looked different. So people could distinguish that I wasn't really part of the Harinam party. But we went to Harvard Square, and I finally could chant to my heart's content, let everybody know I was chanting Hare Krishna. And even I could have run into people I knew, because a few years before, I had worked in Harvard Square at Harvard University Press, but I didn't care. I was happy. And yeah, okay. So everyone was saying that Srila Prabhupada was in India and he was coming very soon. And once I understood the 4 regular principles, and I started chanting 16 rounds, and I started desiring to get initiated by Srila Prabhupada, I was constantly wishing that he would not come soon, because there was a 6-month requirement chanting Hare Krishna, following 4 regs. And I just wanted him to come after 6 months. And actually that worked out exactly like that. So Srila Prabhupada came to New York in July of 1971. And at that time, I had moved temples a few times. I was living in Washington, D.C. And so we drove up to New York. And so the first time I saw Srila Prabhupada was the night before I got initiated. We actually missed his arrival, which was definitely noticed, because we were told we had to come to his departure. But anyway, so the night before, we were all sitting in the prasadam room, stringing our beads. Yeah, my japa beads are now Tulsi because Prabhupada chanted on them, but they were made out of walnut. And I was told because Srila Prabhupada chanted on them. First, I was told they were as good as Tulsi. And then I met Shyama the original Shyama, and he said, no, they are Tulsi. Okay, so anyway, we strung up our beads, and then we went and sat in the temple room waiting for Srila Prabhupada. And it was hot July day. It was packed with devotees because devotees came from all over the East Coast. Even some came from Canada to see Srila Prabhupada. And so I had this idea that the person who wrote Bhagavad Gita, which instantly became my favorite book. Of course, we only had the abridged edition at the time, so it was shorter. But still, I read it, Bhagavad Gita about 4 or 5 times before I said, hey, is there anything else to read? But anyway, it just seemed to me that how could the person who wrote this book be physically and on this planet? It was such a transcendental literature. I just had this ridiculous doubt, even though everybody in Boston, they were all like senior devotees because ISKCON Press was there, which was before the BBT. It was called ISKCON Press, and so many senior devotees, they all had seen Prabhupada, knew Prabhupada, but I still had this crazy doubt until the moment Srila Prabhupada walked through the door. It was like seeing an old friend who I hadn't seen in so long. And it just surprised me that I felt like that. Of course, the next day when our initiation took place, there was an even, I'm sure you've heard devotees express how when Prabhupada is actually looking at you, how, miraculous things happen. In my case, what happened is that there were 6 of us from Washington who were getting initiated, and 4 men and 2 women. And the men went first, and each of them got a name that had Roth in it. So it was Ostaroth, Saptaroth, Dasaroth. Okay. And each of them he defined as one who drives in 8 directions, one who drives in 7 directions, one who drives in 10 directions, even Dasaroth. He didn't even say, this is the name of Lord Ram's father. He didn't. He just said one who drives a chariot in 10 directions. It wasn't even a whole sentence. It was just a definition. Okay, but when he got to the ladies, besides the 2 of us ladies from Washington, there was a little girl who was about 12 years old. She was blonde-haired, blue-eyed, round face, and Prabhupada was totally enchanted with her and saying to her, you're chanting 16 rounds? And she's, yes, Srila Prabhupada. She was the daughter of a devotee who had just gotten initiated the day before. And Prabhupada named her Shashi Mukhi, like moon face. And I don't even remember if the other lady from Washington went first or not. All I know is that I could hear Prabhupada's servant read my name off the list, but he wasn't on the microphone. So only Srila Prabhupada could hear, and I could hear because I was close. And I was in shock. Okay, you know what? I'm really telling the story backwards. I'm sorry to say. I have to go back a bit. I was in New York after Boston. They moved the press to New York, and there's about 25 ladies who we're all brahmatrinis. We're all, wanting to get initiated. And so there was this saying, this what I call a humble pie saying. When someone would say, what do you think Srila Prabhupada is going to name you? The response was, oh, he's going to name me Maya because I'm always in Maya. Okay, now I never was humble, so I never bought into this. But before I got initiated, I was living in Washington, like I said, and the temple president's wife had just had a baby. And so she couldn't go to the initiation to New York. It's a long 5-hour drive. So she said to me, what do you think Srila Prabhupada is going to name you? And then I gave this answer. which like I said, was not sincere. It was not authentic. And I said, Srila Prabhupada's going to name me Maya because I'm always in Maya. By the way, the test for whether I qualified to get initiated was two questions. Who is Krishna? The answer, Supreme Personality about it. And who are you? I am his servant. Okay, you can get initiated. That's how the test went. Okay. So there we are in New York, and I'm looking at Srila Prabhupada, and he says my name on the microphone. And there's this shocked silence throughout the temple. And then Prabhupada started laughing. And then everybody laughed, of course. And this is exactly what he said. I want to get it correct. He said, Mahamaya, Mahamaya, the illusory energy. So illusory energy is not bad. Just like there are phases of the moon, the illusory energy is another phase of Radharani. Those who do not want to serve Krishna, for them, the illusory energy is there. Do you know the rules? I said, yes. And then he handed me my beads. So in that moment, when Prabhupada handed me my beads, that is the moment that Prabhupada was looking at my soul, like layers and layers of my identifying with different lifetimes, different bodies. It was gone. And he's just, it's just hard to describe that connection and that moment, but it was amazing. So, so Srila Prabhupada, I'm sorry, I have a list of things I want to talk about. I'm sorry if I talk too much about myself, but I just wanted, someone had asked me the other day, like, you know, the first time I saw Prabhupada, and I was quoting from the book that I wrote about Srila Prabhupada, and the reason I was able to write a book is because I came to India for the Gaur Purnima festival in 1975, and I stayed for about 2.5 years. And there was just so few devotees at that time. So we just got so much mercy from Srila Prabhupada. And I wanted to share with you an extraordinary thing that happens. I got to fly on an airplane with Srila Prabhupada. The reason that happened is because I was in Vrindavan, and Brahmananda Swami was Prabhupada's secretary at the time. And he asked me, maybe I asked him if I could type. And he let me type Prabhupada's letters. Like Prabhupada would dictate what he wanted to say in the letter, and then Brahmananda would make a tape, and I would transcribe from the tape. And so every day there was, you know, I was giving him the typed letters, he was giving me tapes. So I was seeing him regularly, and he was saying that from Vrindavan, Prabhupada was flying to Ahmedabad for a Pandal program, and that they were going to have a problem with the luggage because he was going from usually traveling first class to regular class. There was less luggage allowance, and they wanted someone to come just to help with the luggage. And I was already, Gopal Krishna was not Maharaj then, but Prabhu had asked me to go to Bombay, to be a secretary. And so I had a ticket. I don't know if I want to go into all these details, but the bottom line is that he convinced me to go on the same flight, but it turned out they didn't need help with the luggage anyway. But my ticket was, I have to explain this detail. It was Delhi, Mumbai, but they were going to Ahmedabad. So I was going to get off the plane early, and the airline people saw this as a big problem. So when I tried to check in, I said, look, I'm getting off the plane early. They said, well, we'll let you on the plane, but if there's any spot, like you have to wait until everybody else is checked in, and then if there's room, you can go on this flight. So the thing is that Prabhupada and his small entourage of, I think it was Brahmananda Swami, Nava Yogendra was Brahmachari, Das Brahmachari, and possibly Harikesh, who was Brahmachari. So this small entourage with Prabhupada had already gone into the waiting room. So by the time they finally said, okay, you can go on this flight, when I came into the waiting room, there was no place to sit. There was not individual chairs. There was it was a very old airport. They rebuilt totally, but there was just benches and there was no place. So I look around, I don't see any places, and it's all men. It's all men, businessmen with their briefcases, and families at that time were very rare to find. So I just sat down on the floor, the dirty, cold floor. And I also had like about 3 or 4 bags over my shoulder. People had asked me to bring so many things. And I just plopped them all down on the floor, paid my obeisances, sat up, and I look at Srila Prabhupada. And he just moved his hand just slightly, and all the people on the bench moved to make room for me. That was so amazing. And only when I sat down and kind of looked around and took in the scene did I realize, I felt like I just had committed the worst faux pas, the worst mistake. To sit on the floor, it wasn't a cultured thing to do. Even though we did it in the airports in America, but they're carpeted and, that was just what we did, but didn't seem to be right in India. Anyway, at that time, I don't remember there was assigned seats. You could, on a plane, you just sit wherever. And so Srila Prabhupada got on the plane first, so he was at the very first seat. So everybody who got on the plane took darshan of Srila Prabhupada, which is really nice. So I was about 7 rows back, and I actually had a Bhagavad Gita with me, and I tried to distribute it to the people next to me. That they didn't take. I've heard stories of devotees distributing books on the airplane, and Prabhupada was very pleased. I was not successful in that, but in any case, they were serving this very light breakfast, and I was refusing. And then the stewardess would say, they're taking up there, and she would point to the devotees with Srila Prabhupada. The devotees in Delhi had packed a huge tiffin for Srila Prabhupada with many compartments, like one of those really, really tall ones. But they were serving like a fruit cake. And so, like I said, I was refusing, but she was saying that the devotees are eating it. And then a hot milk, they brought me hot milk. And then a coffee cup filled with dahi wadas was brought to me, and they said they sent it from up there. And I knew it was Brahmananda Swami. He was, kind of looking after me because he's, the one had convinced me to come on the flight. And sure enough, at one point, Srila Prabhupada got up to go to use the bathroom to wash up, and Brahmananda Swami stood in the aisle, and looked down the aisle, and I signaled that I was thankful that he sent that Mahaprasadam back to me. So when we arrived in Ahmedabad, there was no temple in Ahmedabad at the time, but the devotees from Mumbai had come to put on this Pandal program. So they were all actually on the tarmac, right up to the stairway from people getting off the plane. So when Prabhupada got off the plane, they just surrounded him, and they went off into the terminal, and I don't know what happened because I was way back. Plus, I also had to stay in the terminal to get my luggage. So by the time I was ready to leave the airport, the whole Sankirtan party and Prabhupada had already left. But there was devotees who were getting Prabhupada's bags and his entourage's bags. So they sent me with a man who had a local devotee who had a car. Well, he wasn't a devotee. He was just a grihasta man. And they sent me with him to go to where Prabhupada was going. Only problem was he didn't know. where this place. No, he was supposed to, okay, sorry. He was supposed to take me to where the women were staying, like somebody was, hosting all the women, but he couldn't figure out where it was. So he said, okay, I'll just bring you to where Prabhupada is with all my luggage. Okay. So as far as I remember, the man who was hosting Prabhupada's name was Mr. Bogilal Patel, and he lived in what seemed like a governor's mansion. It was this huge estate that had a fence around it, had grounds, like you had to drive through the grounds before you finally see the house. And there was this huge fountain in front of the house and circular driveway, and everybody was already inside. But I came in with my luggage, and some of the ladies from the family told us that everyone was in the library. He actually had a room that was full of books, like all the walls are covered in books. And that's where Prabhupada and the devotees were. So I left my things outside the door and went in. And Srila Prabhupada was sitting at a very large desk, sitting in a big chair. And it was not just the Mumbai devotees, but then there was a lot of young Indian men from Ahmedabad. And what I remember is that Srila Prabhupada said to these men, what was the first thing he said? He said, what are you studying? And they said, technology. And then Srila Prabhupada said, why are you studying technology? They have already perfected technology in the West. And then he started giving examples, like his dictaphone that he used for translating. It was made in Germany. And then he was talking about Swiss watches, and different devotees are piping up and adding to the list, And then he turned back to the young men and he said to them, I want 100 young men from Ahmedabad to join the movement. And unfortunately, they did not surrender, but you all have, so that's nice. And many, many more than 100, thousands now. So at one point in Prabhupada's talk, he wanted to look up a verse in Bhagavad Gita, and no one had a Bhagavad Gita. But I did. Thing is that, and I went and got it, it was in my luggage outside. But the problem was that in traveling to India, I'd gone to the festival and I stayed, but then I had visa problems. I had to go back and collect again and come back. And I was there for like 6 weeks. And I came back through London and I had so many books with me. It was like ridiculous. And the temple president there convinced me to donate all my books to the London temple to lighten my load, okay? Which I did. But then when I got to Vrindavan, I had to get a Bhagavad Gita. It's my favorite book. So I paid the full price for a brand new Bhagavad Gita. And then they said, okay, get the book from the library. And so every book in that library was old, was not new. And it had on the binding, right? On the binding, temple copy number 2 or whatever, 5, whatever it was. So it looked like I stole that Bhagavad Gita. But Prabhupada wanted to quote from Bhagavad Gita, so I had to do it. He didn't say anything. So this was, you're getting a little bit of picture of, like, I had embarrassing moments with Srila Prabhupada. I didn't really, know how to behave with him, but yet every devotee wanted to be noticed by Srila Prabhupada. That was like our, our we wanted to be acknowledged for serving Prabhupada. And so I'll just tell you one story from Mayapur, because mostly, like I said, I taught Prabhupada in Mayapur. By November of 75, I moved to Mayapur and I stayed there until like a year and a half, almost 2 years. And there was only 6 Western ladies there. There was only about 125 devotees altogether in Mayapur. And if any visitor ever arrived, we would roll out the red carpet, especially when Prabhupada was there. We would make prasadam for them, puri, sabji, and it was just so rare to get guests. So rare. But anyway, Srila Prabhupada had darshan every evening at 5 o'clock until 6 o'clock when evening arti would start. And so I had always wanted to go to Prabhupada's darshans when I was in Vrindavan. I also, was in Mumbai. There was different places where I could have gone to Prabhupada's evening darshans. He always had open door darshan. But my first temple president said, we do not gawk at the spiritual master. You know the word gawk? Like stare at with your mouth open, like, he said, we don't do that. And that was the reason why we hadn't greeted Srila Prabhupada when he arrived in New York. And that was just drummed into my head. So I felt like when Srila Prabhupada has this open darshan, I should just do service. So I used to clean Prabhupada's room. I'd still get nectar because Prabhupada sometimes would end darshan early and I'd still be there cleaning. But in any case, by the time I got to Mayapur, I thought, well, I had gone to one darshan finally here in Mumbai, but I thought I'm going to go to darshan every night because this is not going to last forever. I've got to get the mercy. Plus, somehow or other, I got to be Pishima's servant, Prabhupada's sister. I was her personal servant. I would stay with her and take care of her. And she wanted to go to Srila Prabhupada's darshan every night, even though she did not speak English. She knew 2 words in English, water and wash. This exemplifies Pishima to the T. Many devotees would get doused by Ganga Jal from head to toe when she would meet them. Mostly it was bead bags. She would throw water on, and the devotees, especially Western devotees, like, why did that happen? But that was just Bhishma. She could see contamination where no one else could see it. And she was very, very clean. And there's many stories I could tell you about her. But anyway, she wanted to go. She could also say she could count from 1 to 10, but it all sounded like one word in English. Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But anyway, we would go every night to Prabhupada's darshan. So one night, there was some guests. It was the foreign registration officer from Krishnanagar. So at that point, I was the temple secretary, and I kept track of the devotees' visa information and things like that. Not that I had the passports, but just a list. And just background information. So the FRO officer is there. But when 6 o'clock came around, Srila Prabhupada would tell us to go to Arti because the temple room at that time was on the first floor of the Lotus building, and Prabhupada's rooms were, 2 flights up, and we could hear the bell ringing from the Arti. So he'd send us out. So that night, I went down the steps, and on the first floor was Prabhupada's, the Didi kitchen. And Vrindavan Biharini Dasi from South Africa was cooking. And she stopped me and said, what did Srila Prabhupada say tonight in the darshan? So I was standing there talking to her, telling her what I remembered. And then Bhavananda Swami at the time, he comes down the steps, he sees me and he says, Mahamaya, do you have that list of the foreign devotees, their visa information and passport information? And I said, well, I have it, but it's not up to date. And I could get it together by tomorrow morning. He said, I want you to go back up there and tell Srila Prabhupada. So I had to go back up to Prabhupada's room, and there was a straw mat by the door, paid my obeisances on the straw mat, and then just sat on my heels, just sat right there, didn't sit comfortably on the mattresses covered in white sheets. And then when there was a break in the conversation, Prabhupada turned to me like, I don't remember if he said anything or just like looked at me like, what are you doing here? I just told you to leave. And I just said my little spiel. I said, I have the list of the foreign devotees and I would have it tomorrow morning. And so the FRO man, who in my mind's eye, I think of not not a very nice person. He just kind of stared at me and like and said, "Who is she?" And I didn't know what was going to happen. I looked at Srila Prabhupada and he just confidently said, "She is the secretary." And I'm telling you, when I went out of that room, I was just in total bliss. Like not only did Prabhupada know, I mean, it's kind of ridiculous because materially speaking, anybody could have figured it out that I was the secretary, but still, to me at the time, I just felt like Prabhupada knows who I am. And I was just in bliss. So, okay, I have so many more things I wanted to say. And again, I apologize because it's not enough about Prabhupada and too much about me, but anyway, that's the way it was. Any questions or clarification? Anybody want to? Okay,
Speak something more about her because
you want to hear more about Pishima? Okay, Pishima lived in Calcutta, and she was Prabhupada's younger sister, 3 years younger. So she was very attached to him. I think of all his relatives, she accepted him the way we did. She saw him as Jagat Guru. And yet she had this memory of him. And if we asked her, she would tell the stories about, especially one about flying a kite and how they would pray to Krishna for the wind to blow to carry their kite. I think they were flying on the roof of their house. I'm not sure, but one thing she did, well, Prabhupada, this probably was in 77 because whenever Prabhupada would come to Mayapur, she would come. So I served her in 76 and 77 for like 2 months when Prabhupada was there. And in 77, Prabhupada was sick. And so she wanted to cook for him, but he wasn't eating any ghee whatsoever. They would make dry chances. Well, not really dry. They would make a paste for chances so they didn't have to use ghee. I mean, it was that strict, like Prabhupada wasn't eating any ghee. But one day, okay, so Pishima wanted to cook. So she was upset that they weren't letting her cook for him. So she started up the steps. Now, she was not in good health and very overweight. Prabhupada used to make a lot of jokes about her being overweight. But in any case, it was hard for her to go up the stairs, and so she needed help. She'd hold one arm on the banister, and she'd hold on to me with the other hand. And we went up to the roof when Prabhupada was taking his massage. And I didn't go out onto the roof because I just didn't feel like it was my position to do that, but I could hear Pishima talking to him. And it was in Bengali, so I really don't know exactly what she said, but whatever Prabhupada said to her, she was pacified. And then not long after that, Prabhupada would sometimes eat a snack in the evening, not every night, but sometimes he would be hungry. So one night, she was called on to cook something for Prabhupada. She had a big jar of mustard oil. Bengalis love mustard oil. So she had me go to our room to get this bottle of mustard oil, bring it to the deity kitchen, and she made a sabji. I think it was kachkela, green plantain. And it was brought up to Srila Prabhupada, and we were in the kitchen cleaning when Prabhupada's remnants would come down, this day anyway, and it wasn't always like that, but we couldn't tell if Prabhupada had even eaten any of it. The bowl was still full, pretty much. And the crazy thing was, normally when Prabhupada's plate would come down, people would just be there, ready for that Mahaprasadam. And that day, nobody was there. And we could have eaten the whole thing. We, meaning me and Vrindavan Bhimini. It was so full of mustard oil that neither of us could eat it. But we brought it down to the devotees who were chanting in the temple, the 24-hour kirtan, and they loved it. One time, just to talk more a little about prasadam, I had heard stories about devotees eating the peels, orange peels, after Prabhupada had eaten an orange. And so one time, somehow or other, I got the unedible part of datta. Do you call it datta? A drumstick? Is the Hindi word datta? Bengali word. Drumstick? You know, the long, thin. What's it called? Sin? Sin. Sing. Okay. Yeah, the long veggie cut up. So this part that you can't eat, I ate it. I'm just feeling like, this is full of Prabhupada's saliva. And even though, we typically do not want that from somebody else, but whatever disease Prabhupada had, I wanted it. So, so let me tell you some more about Pishima. So there's one thing I didn't include in my book because it really wasn't my story to tell, but my good friend Ananga Manjari was taking care of Pishima after Prabhupada left the planet. She wanted to leave her body in Mayapur. And there was this whole struggle she had with Bhavananda. He did not want her. I don't know why. He did not want her to leave her body in Mayapur, but guess what? She got her way. She was in the long building. Not sure of the room number, but it was during Gaur Purnim festival that she came, and the devotees all thought, oh, she's going to leave on Gaur Purnim, and they were doing constant kirtans in her room. But she didn't leave her body before Gaur Purnim, and all the devotees who had come to the festival went on to Vrindavan. They took their leave from Pishima, and they went on. So it's just the Mayapur devotees. Now, I wasn't there. I was in America at that time, but Ananga was there. And she was telling me how the Gurukula boys were doing kirtan in her room. And it was the Ekadasi after Gaur Purnim, which is just, 2 or 3 days later. Every year, Gaur Purnim followed by Ekadasi. So, so the Gurukula boys were chanting. There was a few of Pishima's relatives. She had something like 9 children. I think it was like 8 boys and a girl or something like that. And she had a big family, and a few of them were there, but mainly it was the devotees chanting and a few Western devotees. And Ananga told me the story that the moment she left her body, she says she saw Pishima rise, and she looked up and she said she saw Prabhupada reaching his hand down to her, and Pishima's reaching her hand up to him. And this is such a mystical story, and it's not my story. So Ananga Manjari told. So I didn't include it could not include it in the book. Now, actually, I kind of regret this book is not new. Srila Prabhupada's coming. This is 25 years ago I wrote it, but it's still, current. But anyway, now I regret I didn't put it in. I could have, but okay. Is that enough? I could tell you more stories, but it's 9 o'clock exactly. Okay. I do have copies available for donation if anybody's interested. And I'll donate one to there's a library here, right? I can donate one to the library also. Thank you all so much. Hare Krishna. Bless Srila Prabhupada.